This conference will now be recorded.
And guys online, can anyone confirm if you're able to hear my voice and see my screen? Am I audible?
Yeah, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so this is where we are, right? So we established a couple of things. So the very first thing that we started with is that we said, what is a repository in Azure, or what is a repository in Azure DevOps? And I said that a repository is a place where a developer can, or where let's say an organization can store their code, right? And multiple developers can be working at the same time on these repositories. And we are working on something known as a distributed version control mechanism. And we are working, or we are particularly concerned about something known as a Git, right? This is a Git. So let's do one thing. Let's establish all those things what we know, and let's take it from there. So we said we have a Git repository, and a repository contains of what? Branches. And we said what is a branching and a merging strategy, wherein we said that we will have a main branch. From a main branch, we will pull something known as a develop branch, and we will implement something known as branch policies. So guys, can anyone tell me why do we need branch policies?
To secure
To
the
restrict,
branches.
to protect our branches. So if my develop branch has a branch policy, can I commit directly onto the develop branch? No. So the developers, what they have to do is that they have to come with a feature branch, right? So let's imagine that we have a developer right now. The developer needs to create another branch known as what? Feature. So let's say this is a feature branch that the developer is playing around with. So this is a feature branch what the developer needs to create. And once he creates, he can make his changes and he can raise a pull request, right? And when the developer raises a pull request, what are all the branching policies we have implemented in our project right now? One approver, comment resolutions, next, work item. And what is the fourth one that we implemented yesterday? Build validation, where we said that we want to now get in a third party tool called as Sonar, and we integrated that Sonar with our repository. So let's go into the develop branch. So we have integrated the Sonar into the repository. So if you go into the branches and go into the policies of these branch, we see that there are a lot of policies that are implemented. So at least one reviewer, and we said who's the reviewer here? We said it's a technical lead whose basically name starts with rback contributor at the gmail.com. And we said check for link work items. We said check for comment resolutions, and then we went ahead and added a Sonar validation out here, so that whenever a developer creates a pull request, firstly, the Sonar will analyze the entire feature branch, give a complete report on what are the bugs, what are the vulnerabilities in the code, and etc. And in case the Sonar passes, so will your PR get merged. And if your lead approves, your PR will get merged. After the PR is merging, what is the process, guys? What should happen after the PR merges? So I'm here, the developer has merged his PR into the develop branch. What will happen now? Feature branch will be deleted. Great. After that,
Build
pipeline.
will
Build
pipeline.
will run. So we have a continuous integration pipeline. We said we have a pipeline here, and there are a couple of things out here. So let's focus upon this pipeline for now, which is a full framework application. And if I edit this in the triggers, is where I went ahead and enabled something known as what? Continuous integration. We enabled the continuous integration onto the develop branch, and we included something known as what? Path filters. So that only if the code is coming into .NET full framework application project or this particular project, this build pipeline should trigger, right? This is where we are right now. So also this is doing restoration, build and everything, and we don't need this. So I'll just remove this out. and this will publish your artifact. So here, after the pull request is done and after the develop branch gets the code, from here I am now saying that you will have what? A build pipeline. So let's say we now have what? A build pipeline or a continuous integration pipeline. I can call this as anything, either build or continuous integration pipeline, which at the end is giving you an artifact. So you are getting something known as the artifact, right? Now I said, what should we do with this artifact? So I said we need to take this artifact and we need to deploy it on top of Azure. Like any, let's say we are dealing with Azure Web Apps. So I need to take this artifact. I need to package this artifact entirely. I need to take it to an Azure Web App. So if I need to take it to an Azure Web App, what all do I need, guys? Can you all imagine or can you all think of what all do I need here? Anyone? If I want to take this zip file that is getting generated at the end of a CI build, and I want to make sure that now my target, now this entire process is my continuous integration, right? This is where continuous integration is done. What is the
Correct.
next process? Release.
Next is release.
Right. Next is release, right? So if I want to release, what all do I need? What all do you think that I
So
need?
you need to know the host system where we can
Mhm.
deploy the zip file.
Okay, you need a system, or rather, I could say you need a platform where you can deploy the zip file. And in my
Correct.
case, I'm saying that this platform, whatever that we are talking about, is sitting in a cloud called Azure, right?
Correct.
It's sitting in a cloud known as Azure. And I'm saying that this, let's say, in Azure, I have an app service plan and a very simple Azure web app. Let's start with this. I have an app service plan and I have an Azure web app to which I want to take my code, whatever I have packaged, and using something known as a release pipeline. Now I'm talking about a release pipeline right now. Until now, we talked about what? Build pipeline, right? Now I'm talking about a release pipeline here. And I'll say, okay, fine. This pipeline will take whatever artifact that is there and release it onto an Azure environment. This is my continuous process. This entirely that you see is a CI/CD process. This is what we as DevOps engineers primarily need to do, a CI/CD implementation. Now let's see how it is done. Now we have a build pipeline, so we're good till here. Let's say stay and let's say save. And let's take a step back right now. And we have a build pipeline. This is our build pipeline right now. And this build pipeline at the end of the day is giving you something known as what? A zip file, right? A zip file out here. So you get all these things, analysis, reports, and everything. And finally, you get a zip file. Now, what let's do is that I have been working until now till here into something known as pipelines, right? This is where I am working. I created pipelines and etc. Now I want to go further and I will say I want a release pipeline right now because whatever I have produced in the build pipeline, I will take it and I will deploy it into a release pipeline. How do I create a release pipeline? Let's go here into something known as releases. And right now it says no release pipelines found. Now you will also see the same thing when you start with your Azure DevOps organization. You'll basically see the same thing out here. I'll say new pipeline, and this is a .NET pipeline, right? It's a .NET full framework that I'm working on. So I'll say this is a .NET pipeline, okay? And let's say this is release. So I'm giving a meaningful name, and it is telling add an artifact. because when it's telling, when basically when you're doing a release, right, it expects you give it an artifact. So where is your artifact? Zip file. Where is it? In the drop. Where is the drop? It's in a build pipeline. I'll say add an artifact, and you have multiple options here telling that okay fine, you have Azure artifacts, GitHub, a lot of things, but I am telling that my artifact is coming from something known as what? A build pipeline in Azure DevOps. And I am saying that okay fine, this is the project in which that build pipeline is there, and I'm saying the source build pipeline is what, guys? Which pipeline should I take now?
First pipeline, right?
First pipeline, second pipeline, third pipeline, which one?
First
Third.
pipeline, I think.
First is what? .NET Core.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Second pipeline. Second is the full framework. Third is a
Full frame.
validator, which is not giving you any artifact. So let's say second one, and I'll say okay fine, whatever is the latest version of this, please take it. And I'm saying okay fine, this is how you take this out, and I'll say add. I'm just saying add this. Now it's telling you okay great, I added this out. Now tell me, where is your target? And what is our target here? An Azure app service. So I'll say okay fine, all the targets are defined in something known as stages. So I'll say add a stage. I'll say new stage, and I'll give a name to the stage. Okay, I'll say empty job. So I'll begin with an empty job, and I'll give a name to the stage known as development, which I'm considering that I need a development environment. And I'll say okay. Now I'll say go into the stage, and you have a couple of things out here. Just like a build pipeline, this one starts with a stage. Each and every stage has a job, a particular job out here. Inside the job, you can mention tasks. So it is stage, and this stage is a development stage. It's an agent job. You can mention the name something like release the code. Okay. You can say, okay, fine. This phase of the agent will just do one thing, take the code and release it. And now I will say, okay, great. Add a step inside this particular job. And once I say, okay, fine, this is job and etc. Right? This job is also looking for what? An agent. An agent in what? Azure DevOps. And I can select, okay, fine. Please give me something like Windows, 2019 latest, like whichever I used to build. I said, okay, fine. Please give me a latest agent. And the only work of this agent is to copy that artifact and publish it to a web application that is running in Azure. Guys, if you're not speaking, can you please go on mute? Okay, thank you. So I'll say add, and this is a web app, right? And web app is also called as what? App service. I'll say app service. Has a lot of things when I type in app service. One of those things is what? Azure App Service Deploy. I'll say add. It says, okay, fine, you need a couple of settings out here. Now it's asking me, what is the Azure subscription? Secondly, it's asking me what is the app service name? So it's asking me a couple of things like what is the subscription that you have? So in my case, I have what? Pay as you go. I'll say, okay, fine, this is a pay as you go subscription that I need. And now it says, okay, fine, do you want to authorize a subscription? Now, why should I authorize this? Because portal.azure.com is a different service. Dev.azure.com is a different service. You need to establish a trust or a relationship between portal.azure.com and dev.azure.com. So this is the first thing. So let's say we need a couple of things right now in order to release. Let's understand this a bit technically. So we are using a release pipeline. Release pipeline is releasing where? To Azure. So I am saying there should be a trust between your dev.azure.com, which is a software as a service, and portal.azure.com. Right? There should be something like a bridge, or there should be something like a trust between these two things. Now, yesterday, when we were talking about dev.azure.com and sonarcloud.io, two different softwares as a service, how did we establish this trust, guys? Yesterday, when we connected dev.azure.com with the Sonar Cube, what all did we do?
with the key.
Sorry, add to the list. Okay, I added it. But how did I establish the trust? Like, how did I establish the connection between Sonar portal, key, and etc.? But more importantly, what was it? Service connection. It was something known as what? Service connection. In the same way, if I apply the same concept to dev.azure.com and portal.azure.com, there should be a connection between those two. I can call the same thing as service connections right now. So if I now go here, let's come back to the release pipeline in a while. I'll just duplicate this tab and I'll just say project settings. Okay. If I go into the project settings, you have something known as what? Service connections, meaning what are all the third party tools that Azure DevOps wants to connect to? Do you want to connect to an AWS? Do you want to connect to a Kubernetes cluster, whatever it is? I'll say, okay, fine. Now we have what? One service connection. When did we establish this? Yesterday when we are doing Sonar. So since you have a service connection here, Azure is able to talk to Sonar and Sonar is able to talk to Azure, a two-way bridge. In the same way, what I'll do right now is I will now add something known as what? A new service connection, and you have a list of the service connections. AWS for Terraform, Azure Classic, Resource Manager, Bitbucket. You have a list. You name it, you get it. You have a list of the connections out here. And I am looking for one particular connection, which is called Azure Resource Manager, ARM. We are using something known as an ARM model for Azure, for portal.azure.com. So I am saying it's an ARM service connection that I want to establish between, let's say, the dev.azure.com and the portal.azure.com. And I will say next. Now it is which kind of model, or how do you want to go ahead and establish your connection between portal and DevOps? I will say service principal. Manual, not automatic. Let's do manual. Let's understand what is the procedure that goes here. And I will say next. Now it's telling me, okay, fine. Give me a couple of details like the subscription ID, subscription name. Very importantly, service principal ID, service principal key, tenant ID. Now, how do I get this? Let's go again back to portal.azure.com. So very importantly, guys, this connection is a two-way trust. Now, yesterday, when we wanted to establish, let's say, the connection between portal.azure.com and Sonar, sorry, dev.azure.com and Sonar, what did we do at the Sonar end? We generated what? Token key, whatever it is. We took the token and we put it into Azure, or we put it into DevOps. And so they were able to talk to each other. In the same way, what I'll do right now is, let's see if I have any resource groups, etc. No, nothing. What I'll do right now is that now where will I register all my users in portal.azure.com? Can anyone tell me where do you add the users in portal.azure.com?
Active Directory, sir.
Active Directory. It's something known as, there is a service known as what? Azure Active Directory, which holds all the users. Now, the challenge for me is that dev.azure.com is not a manual user. I cannot give it an ID and assign it. That is the reason I need to add something known as a service principal. A service principal is the identity of dev.azure.com. Like you have an ID, dev.azure.com will have a service principal. How do I create something like that? Coming to portal.azure.com, I'll say Azure Active Directory. I'm going into Azure Active Directory. And I'm saying here, you can go ahead and add a user. In the same way, if I want to register an application, now dev.azure.com is an application, right? I want to register an application. I'll come here. You have something known as what? App registrations. I'll go into app registrations and I'll say all and I'll say new app registrations. I'll say the application name is something like whatever is the name of, let's say, this particular project, which is ATM class project, right? I'll say this ATM class DevOps. I'm giving it a name. I'm not doing anything else apart from this, just giving it a name and I'm saying register. Okay. I am saying register, and in a second you have the application got created. You have an application got created. You have something known as a client ID, tenant ID, everything that is there. You also have, if I scroll down, you also have something known as what? Secrets and certificates. I'll go here and I'll say add a new client secret. I'll say this is a DevOps secret. And it says, okay, fine, I have some expiry. Basically, you have to select this. I'll say, okay, fine, I want to generate this secret for 3 months. And I'll say add. As and when I add, right, you have a secret value that got generated. I'll copy this. Very importantly, please copy this, because if you refresh the screen, the secret value will not be again displayed. You cannot get it again, okay? Paste it here. This is what the secret value. So I've generated a secret value. I have all the details that I need right now. So what I'll do is that I'll copy the client ID, go back to the service connection, and I'll say either the service principal ID or the client ID is the same. I'm pasting it here. Then it's asking what? Service principal key. I copied the key here, right? I'll take this key, paste it here. It's asking for a tenant ID. Where will I find the tenant ID, guys? Can anyone tell me where is the tenant ID here? Third one, directory or tenant ID. Tenant ID, taking this out and going into, let's say, dev.azure.com. Tenant ID, I pasted this out. Finally, it's asking me the subscription ID and the name of the subscription. Now, where will I find the subscription ID? Anyone? Any?
Under subscriptions. Filter.
Subscriptions. So subscription, I'll go into subscription, and this is a subscription ID. So I'll just go here and I'll grab the subscription ID and the name of the subscription. So this is the name and this is the ID. So I'm taking the subscription ID, going here into Azure DevOps, pasting the subscription ID. Name I'll say is pay as you go, because this is what my subscription is. Finally, I'll say verify. Okay. Are we good here? I'll say no, verify this thing. The Azure, yes, it's the same. Now, do you see? I get an error here telling that it is failed to query and etc. Can anyone see or can anyone read what this error is? It says code authorization failure. The client 9 something does not have the authorization to perform an action over your subscription. Now, let's go a step back, okay? What did you do till here? You have created something known as app registration. I am now telling that app registration is representing dev.azure.com. Now, let's say you created a user. Let's say I take someone's email ID and basically add them into my portal in the Active Directory. If I don't give them any role, will they be able to use my subscription? In the same way, if I don't give any role to this particular app registration, will it be able to use this particular or will this particular DevOps will be able to communicate with Azure? No. Mainly, that's what the error is talking about. It's saying, you know what? The client ID does not have an authorization to perform a read or a write operation on top of your subscription. So I won't be able to add this. Please refresh your credentials. So for that, what I'll do is I will go into what? Identity and access management. and I will say add a role, and I'm saying add a add a role assignment out here, and I will select a role called contributor. I'll say next. I'll say okay fine, user group and etc. Add. This is where I added y'all, like I added an ID actually. But right now what I'll do, I'll add the 8 a.m. class project. 8 a.m. class DevOps. This was the app registration that I created, and I'll say add, select, next, review and assign. I am adding a role-based access control to the app registration that I've created, and I'm using this app registration in what? dev.azure.com. Let's do a verification right now again. Verification is now what? Successful. This is the issue what you'll get if you don't add a role. So you can get a verification failure if you don't add a proper role, if you're not giving a proper secret. These are two things. And you have to also give the proper tenant ID, proper subscription ID, and a proper name to the subscription. Then here it's asking me what is the service connection name. I'll say it is Azure DevOps underscore 8 a.m. service connection SC. I'm just giving up. I mean, you can name anything here. I'll say verify and save. What did I do? I verified and save. So now there is a connection between portal.azure.com and what? dev.azure.com. So I was able to connect both of them securely. Now I'll come down to my release pipeline, and this is where I am. I'll say refresh, and I'll just click on this drop down. You have what? Azure DevOps 8 a.m. service connection that is getting reflected here. I'll select this. You're not asked for an authorization. You don't have to give a password here because the connection is already established. It's taken care. Done. Good till here, guys. All good. Like any questions still here? So this is how you add something known as a service connection between Azure DevOps and portal.azure.com. Fine. Now I have a couple of things out here to declare. First of very things is the display name. You can give anything. I'll say, okay, deploy to this particular Azure app service. Great. And it's telling me, okay, fine. What is the Azure subscription? We have given this, done, taken care. Then second thing, it's asking, or third thing is asking me for what? What is the name of your app service? And it's giving you a drop down. Do you find anything here? Why? You do not have any app service in the portal. So what I'll do is come down in the portal and quickly create one. Okay. So let's say development. Let's say ECS2, review and create. And once the resource group is created, I'll create an app service here. I'll say, okay, go into, let's say, create, and I'll say web app. And in the web app, I'll say this is the development, pay as you go, and etc. Then I'll say this is a develop East US2 net full framework, something like this. The full framework application, it's a development application, it's in East US2 location. And this is the name of the application that I'm creating. And I'm saying, what should be the runtime stack here? What should I select here? .NET full framework. So what is the option here that I need to select? V4.8, exactly. It's not a core, it's a 4.8 application, and it says it can only run on Windows. And I'll say, okay, fine. Give me something in ECS2. And I will say, okay, fine. Create a new plan. Name is something like test plan or development plan. Let's do a dev plan. Okay. And I'll say change the size to F1. Like, because every one of y'all would basically see F1 in the beginning, right? F1 is good enough. I'll say apply. Deployment. I don't need any deployment out here. I'll say disable. Monitoring, no, nothing. So I'll say disable the monitoring as well. I'll say tags and review and create. So I'm not giving any tags here. So tags are optional in nature. Not giving any tags, I'll say review and create. So once this is created, let's come back to Azure DevOps. Let's add this connection and see what happens out here. Let's give this a second, guys. And any questions still here, guys? Anyone not following anything? Any questions still here? Any doubts or any clarifications that I need to give here? Anyone, guys, online, offline? Are you able to follow what is the procedure that we are doing right now? Anyone, guys? Any questions? Let's give it a second to create the app service and let's see what happens after that. App service is created. I'm not doing anything here. Going back into my release pipeline. I'll say refresh. And now I'll say click on the drop down. You have the app service, which is called dev something like this. I'm selecting the app service right now. I'm coming down and it's asking me where is your zip file, because you'll take a zip file and deploy it onto the app service. I'll say click on these three dots here. It'll take a second to load. After that it says okay fine, this is the linked pipeline. Click on this pipeline, drop inside which what? .NET application. I'm just taking this, and finally I'll do one quick thing out here. I'll say additional options. Let's see, post deployment actions. I'll just say remove files at the destination. Okay, I'll just say remove the additional files at the destination. This is good enough. I will now say save. Done. And now what I'll do is after I saved, I'll say create the release, and it's asking me which stage which stage do I need to take this release to. I'll say what? Development, and I'll say create. Now just like your build pipeline, it will now wait for an agent. It's saying agent job is ready. It will now take that agent and it says okay fine, the progress is there. It'll say initializing job. It's acquiring the agent right now. So the first step everything is that it will look for an agent. It's acquiring the agent. Second step will be the download of the artifact on top of the agent machine. Third, it's doing what? It's trying to get the connection details for the application, going into the zip file, taking all the contents and unzipping on top of the application. This is what it's doing right now. So it's saying Azure App Service deploy, dev something like this, and now it's saying adding this path. Now where did you see all the steps, guys? When we did a publish from Visual Studio, we saw the same thing, right? Instead of coming from a Visual Studio right now, I am using dev.azure.com or a DevOps practice in order to complete the entire cycle. Okay. So let's wait for a second and let's see what will happen after this. Okay. So it says so many files are, I added 110 files, one file I deleted, 4 files are updated, and finally it's saying successfully updated the Azure App Service. Done. It took 56 seconds for your release to go. Okay, and this is done. Let's come back to the portal, go into the Azure Web App. Let's click on this file right now, or let's click on browse. And let's see what it returns in return, what the page will get here and etc. So this is, since it's a first boot, it will take some time and it should probably show you the .NET application out here. So let's give some time and see what happens. So this is what is the procedure that we followed till now. Developer is there. He's committing the code using a feature branch into the develop branch. You are triggering a CI pipeline. getting an artifact, created a release pipeline, created a service connection between the Azure portal and the release pipeline, and then you said, okay, fine, using this release pipeline, let's take the .zip folder into the Azure web app. And this is what it is. Application version 6. Now let's do a full cycle right now. Let's understand how can I automate this also. Right now what I did, I said create a release. I went ahead and I said create a release. But right now what I'll do is that in the best interest of automation, because I also want to automate this process right now, right? There's a button here, like a flash button. Click here and I'll say enable. This is called continuous deployment trigger. Okay. So let's see what happens right now. Let's say enable continuous deployment trigger. So I have the entire setup done. My project is entirely set up right now. Okay. Now I'll say, okay, fine. Let me go back to the repository. Now I am a developer. Now what you have here, you have version 6. I want to now develop what? Version 7. I want to go to the next version out here. So what I will be doing right now is that as a developer, I am first cloning the code into let's say the repository that I have. I mean into let's say the VS code that I have. So let's do a clone. I'll say clone in VS code. I'll say open. So I'm opening my VS code right now, and as a developer, I'm cloning this out. Okay. So let's give it a second. I'll say okay. Open this out, and now it will do clone. It's asking where should I clone it. I'll go into H, create a new folder out here, telling that this is a let's say a full repo. Select repository, and it is cloning here, right? So it is making sure to download all the code that I have, let's say on the repository, into what? My local system. And this is what? It's a git clone. So what I'm doing in a git clone, I am downloading this out, right? So it says, okay, fine. I say open, and you'll have all these files out here. Okay, so you just give it a second and it'll say, okay, fine, ASP.NET repo. Okay, not this one. Let's open up a folder. Okay, I think it went ahead and cloned the entire, or it cloned the it cloned, let's say, the master branch. Let's check out this out. And I'm checking the branch out to what? Develop branch. So I'm able to see all the code right now. Initially, there was nothing in the master branch. So that's the reason you did not see anything there. Now you have the develop branch out here and it has all the code. Can I do a direct commit here? You have to do a feature commit. So how do I create a feature branch from this? Develop. I'll say create a new branch from. I'll say it is feature. I'll say Kiran something like B, and I'll say number. I'll say from which branch do you want to create it? I'll say develop. And my checkout branch is what? Feature Kiran something like this. Now as a developer, I'm coming here. I'm saying okay, fine. .NET Full Framework Applications, Views, Home, Index.html. In here, I'll just change this version to what? 7. Save this out. Then do what? What should I do next? Commit. Before commit, should I do anything? I need to do a stage of the change. So I'm staging my changes. After the changes are staged, I'll say this is version 7. Commit. Finally, publish the branch. Branch is published. Let's go back into our repository. Go check the branches out. I have what? Feature. This branch is there. I'll say what? create a pull request into what? Main develop, into the develop branch out here. This is version 7 and these are the files that I changed. Just this. I'll say, yeah, work item, sorry, yes. Work item, and I'll say create. So what happened firstly? You have the Sonar validation got triggered. So you have this build pipeline that we were checking yesterday, that you had the Sonar validation automatically getting triggered, and this will validate the entire feature branch. This is one of the mandatory checks. The other check that I had was what? Someone should review the code. Who should review the code here? Like whoever is your team lead. In my case, it is whom? Like if I go into the pull request, RBAC contributor, like it says contributor must approve this out. So I'll go as a contributor into this particular project, pull requests, then say approve. I'm approved. And as a developer, I'll just set it to autocomplete and delete my branch after the completion is done. Now I am waiting for the build pipeline to successfully, or I'm waiting for the Sonar to successfully get complete. And after this pull request is merged, what will happen, guys? Feature will be deleted. Next, what is going to happen? Feature
Continuous
is getting
integration
deleted
pipeline
here.
will trigger.
Continuous integration
And
pipeline will trigger.
uh,
After the continuous integration pipeline trigger, what it is giving me? Artifact.
artifact
After the artifact is getting produced, what should happen now?
should
It should
continuous
go into
deployment
the
will.
release and it should deploy it into the Azure web app that I have. So let's come back. This is going to take some time. It'll take somewhere around 3 minutes for this pipeline to trigger, because it should analyze the entire thing, right? So it should analyze the entire Sonar should get analyzed, right? So let's wait for this to happen. So here the Sonar analysis is running. It'll take about 1 minute, or somewhere around 1.5 minutes. After the analysis is done, you will have the artifact. After the analysis is done, you will have the merge done. After the merge is done, you will have the build pipeline getting triggered, or the continuous integration pipeline getting triggered. After the continuous integration is done, you will have a continuous deployment pipeline that is getting triggered. Okay. So let's wait for this to happen. And while this is happening, please let me know if you have any questions. Anything that you're not following here, guys? Anything that you're not following here? Anything basically that you're missing? Anything? Anything, guys? Anyone? Any questions? So once this is done, we will now see what is going to happen. We'll see two things: what will happen to the PR, and then what will happen in the build pipeline. After the build pipeline, then what is going to happen? So this is what we have to understand right now. This is a flow what we are right now following out. Now, one question that I have for you all is that I went ahead into the portal and I created the Azure web app. This is just one web app, okay? Let's say if you have different teams. Let's say, for example, if you have 10 teams, they need 10 resource groups and 2 web apps in each resource group. And they want it to be created before you deploy the code. Because I have an issue that if, let's say, the code is getting created or the code is getting deployed at this end of this month, I'll have to prepare my infrastructure, right? Because if the code has to deploy, the infrastructure should be ready. So I'll say I'll prepare my infrastructure somewhere around the 15th. And I have 15 days gap. In this 15 days gap, don't you think your application is running and you're paying some charge for Azure? That is A. B is how much of manual work are you doing here? Just in case if it gets deleted, then what is the next thing out here? So what is, let's say, or what do you suggest here, guys? How do we create the infrastructure? ARM. So you use an ARM template. But should I create the infrastructure by using the ARM template from my local machine? Or Should I save my ARM template somewhere? Azure DevOps. Okay, where should I save my ARM templates in Azure DevOps? How can I save my ARM templates in Azure DevOps? Anyone? Sorry? Anyone guys online, offline? If let's say repository is great, repository is a great place to store. So let's come back there. So the build pipeline is done. I mean the validation is done. Code is merged. After the code got merged, you have the build pipeline got triggered automatically because we are working in a continuous integration flow, and it is telling okay fine, the build pipeline got triggered and now it's running the code analysis here. This will take some time, and finally it will publish what it will do? Artifact. It's going to give me the artifact. After the artifact is done, I should go into the release pipeline. So let's give it a second and let's see what is going to happen here. So let's close this tab. I don't need this. Now the analyzer will run. It will analyze the entire code and it will then give me the artifact out here. Okay, so what all did you do out here? You created a release pipeline. You made sure to establish a trust between dev.azure.com and portal.azure.com by using a concept known as service connection. And after that, you went ahead and manually created an infrastructure, which is a resource group and an Azure app service there. Now I am saying that this is good, but it is still not automated yet because I am manually going into the portal and I am creating the Azure app service. If it's one app service, it's good, not a problem. If there are 10 teams who are asking for different configurations, okay, in different resource groups, they have different requirement, then how do I create so many things out there? And how do I automatically do it? So one answer is yes, ARM template. You will definitely need an ARM template there. But where do I store the ARM templates? Should I save it in my local machine? Is that okay? Azure DevOps. So where in Azure DevOps should I store it? So right now build pipeline is done. As and when the build pipeline is done, you have a release created here. Now this is the release that we manually created. This is the code release that got automatically created because your build pipeline was successful and now you're taking the code and deploying it on top of an Azure web app which is there in the Azure portal, right? This is the entire CI/CD cycle. This is also known as software development lifecycle, SDLC. So it's going to take just a minute to just go ahead, update the code there. And after updating the code, what should you see on the portal, guys? Version 7.
Okay.
Done. Let me take this, copy it, go into the incognito window. And let's see how it looks like. So it initially takes about 30 or 40 seconds in order to load this out. Like it's normal, completely normal out here. And after it loads out, you should be able to see what? Version 7 of the code. Okay, let's wait for a second and see. You have a version 7 right now. Now guys, this is released. Version 7 is released. I can also go ahead and do a version 8. Same software lifecycle kind of continues to happen. Version 7 is released, but the issue with the version 7 is that this was not properly tested. It was not properly tested and it was released on the application or it was released on the cloud. Now I have an issue. I want to go back to version 6. What should I do now then? How will I go back? Anyone?
Revert the release.
I'm sorry?
It's rollback the release, rollback to release
Roll
1
back the
version,
release.
the previous.
So you roll back the release, meaning
Okay.
the biggest advantage of DevOps is that it gives you a flexibility to see your releases. Meaning, let's do this, okay? This is what release 2. What did release 2 update? Updated from 6 to 7. So it updated from what? 6 to 7. What did release 1 do? It took 6.
Base
If
release.
I go into this release pipeline, if I do a redeploy of it, now it's telling what? Rolling back changes. It's an older release, you're rolling back this change, deploy it out. It will take a minute to update the application. This is how we roll back the versions. So from downgrade from a 7 to 6 now, I don't have to go to a developer and ask him what is the code change that you have done, because I'm storing everything in my release pipeline. This concept is known as version control. Are you controlling, or how you're controlling your versions? Meaning, do you have a, let's say, a list of versions that basically that you can readily be available and you can deploy this out? And it'll again take a minute, and it should update the code back to what? Or it should bring back the code back to 6. Done. Now if I, let's say, again go into the incognito window, it'll probably load from my cache. It'll probably show version 7 only, but let's try to see this out. So this is known as rollback or downgrade, whatever it is. All these things are achieved by something known as Azure DevOps. And this concept, what I'm doing right now, is known as a version control. It's a 6 version right now. So it did not take a lot of time for you from a DevOps practice. If you had done this from a local machine, you had to reach out to the developer who has that code, who has that version, ask him to build, then do give a deployment. Let's say the developer is not present in that day. Let's say he's on a leave or something like that. Then how? All these questions are now answered by Azure DevOps. It's saying, okay, fine, now implement a DevOps practice. Don't ask your developers to build their code manually on the local machine. Please take all the code to what? dev.azure.com, release the code from here. Okay. Any questions with this process, guys? Anything till here before moving forward? Anything, guys? Anything here?
So release, Kiran, the release, right? So we are doing with Azure portal again, okay? So if we are establishing a connection, a
Right.
trusted connection between Azure portal and DevOps. So what will happen to suppose AWS if you are using another cloud? So the similar way will go, or it's only just giving a maybe public IP kind of thing or something? Because here is a web
No, no.
service, we are giving
You will.
web app name and all.
So no, you will have to establish a connection. Meaning, you will have to establish a connection. Like I said, you have service connections out here for different third-party integrations. Let's say service connections. It's not only for Azure, but if I add a service connection, you have multiple things out here, like an AWS cloud for Terraform, and you have Azure Classic. I mean, you have a lot of external connections that you can go ahead and establish out here. This is where you will have, let's say, a connection to AWS, or this is where you will have a connection to a cloud like GCP and etc. that is coming into picture. So you will have to establish a trust between Azure DevOps and the cloud that you're actually deploying your code to. And this trust relation is established using this particular service connection concept. Is that okay?
Okay, any cloud we can use it. Any cloud we
Any
can
cloud.
connect from here.
Yes. If you look at this side, it says AWS for Terraform, meaning it's establishing a connection with AWS using Terraform, and it's now telling GCP for Terraform and etc. So you can establish a trust relationship between any cloud and Azure DevOps.
For Azure, it's not showing as Terraform and all, but why it's showing for AWS and others a Terraform?
Because Azure by default works on an engine known as ARM. This is the engine what Azure works on. It's called Azure Resource
Okay.
Manager engine. So that's the reason it's not showing Terraform for something, but you can do Terraform practice as well using the same service connection. Okay, any more questions here, guys? So now the concept is that this is good. I am good. I have taken a CI/CD pipeline. I have released my code and etc. This is good. But here I am now facing an issue that my target is not just one application. Now this is where environments come into picture, guys. Let's say, let's take this out, put it aside for a second. My target, yes, Azure Cloud, definitely yes. But I have different teams, like a development team. So the development team needs a development RG, let's say resource group. It needs a development RG. It needs couple of services like an Azure App Service. Like I'm just giving you a very bare basic idea. I have an Azure App Service here. This is now known as what DevRG, okay? The first environment, now I'm talking about environments. It's a development environment. So what are we doing? We are using the release pipeline to move the code to the development environment, right? So we are using a stage called development. But is development only the target? No. I also have a QA team which wants to test the code. So I need another environment wherein I can have a resource group. I can have an app service inside that particular resource group. And I will now call this as what? QA environment, where I can do a lot of testing. Finally, I will say after this testing is done, I will have to give the code to the customer, or I'll have to give the application to the end user. Let's say in my case, the client is Ola. I want to make sure to take the new code and give it to what? Ola. So I'll say I have another environment known as production, very, very important environment. And I have a web app here also. And this is the environment where I have what? The client interacting directly or the user interacting directly, right? So my code should go what? From dev to QA. From QA, it should be tested and it should go to what? Production. This process is known as code promotion from one environment to the other. Now, what all do I need in order to make sure to promote this code like this? Now, if I go into my release pipeline, let's say release, and let's edit this pipeline. And I have what? Dev to what? Sorry, code to what? Development. I need similar stages for QA and for production. But I don't have a web app that is created for a QA and the production. I only have a development web app. Let's imagine that it's just not a web app. It's a web app, storage account, SQL Server, networks, everything. In case the resource group gets deleted, you'll also need a strategy to restore it very quickly. So I will use a concept called ARM templates because I want to automate the creation of infrastructure. There are two things that I'm doing right now. One, I have achieved a code automation. Code automation is done because whenever a developer is committing, it's triggering a CI, it's triggering a CD, it's giving the end output. Great. This is great, not a problem. But am I automating the creation of infrastructure? No, I haven't done that. I did it manually. So in order to automate the infrastructure, I am suggesting there is a technology known as ARM templates, where we all have practiced ARM templates and etc. And I will say, okay, fine. In order to make sure that everyone is accommodated, I will create an ARM template. But where should I save the ARM template? I will say I will save the ARM template in my local machine. Is that okay? No, not at all. Because if I leave the organization, who's going to give me the template? So where should I save the template? Where did I save the code?
Repository.
No, repository. Guys, very important. Please don't forget this. This beginning of the life cycle is from the repository, right? into the develop branch of a repository. I want to save my ARM templates also inside this repository. This is what I'm going to do. Let's do one thing. In order to save an ARM template, I'll have to write an ARM template. So let's write an ARM template first. So let's say, fine, I'll open up a new window out here. I'll say new file, select language, ARM, and this will take some time in order to load the ARM template server. So let's give it a second, and once it loads, I'll say ARM exclamation. I will say I'll take the outputs out. Functions also, I don't need this right now. And I want the same template to be reused for development, QA, prod. I need the same template to create all the resources for me. So let's also do one thing. Let's say simulate a situation where the entire resource group is deleted. I don't have anything. I'll start from the scratch. I'll say delete this out. Delete, done. Now inside the resource, I'll say ARM. Even now it will take some time in order to display this for me. So I want to create two resources here. One, Azure App Service. The other is an Azure App Service plan. I can do it either with VS Code or I can do it either with Visual Studio 2019. Whichever is easier for you all, you can go ahead and create that using this particular thing out here. Okay. Or if let's say it's easier, I'll go into a public repository. I anyways have like a lot of templates out there. So instead of creating one, I'll just take one. So this is the repository where I'm saving all these templates and etc. So I have already a template for Azure Web. Let's say automation, and let's say ARM templates. I have a web app. You can reuse this. Okay. Let's say SQL for not this one. This is the application template that I have. So this is what we wrote, right? Using a Visual Studio, we went ahead and wrote this out. Do you all remember this, guys? Do you all remember how did we write this? Is that okay? Or you can write one new. But this will take some time, like it'll take a minute or two in order to load the server. So we can wait for that to load and then we can write something out here. Okay, either you can write or you can use an existing one. Now, if I use an existing one, all I'll do is just copy the entire thing. That's it. Now, if you look at it, right? Now, does anyone remember that we written this out? We have written this out, isn't it? There are a couple of things out here. Like in the parameters, I am saying hosting plan name and I'm giving a default value. You're telling that this is a string and all that stuff. Now it says there's an error and all that stuff. But now, do you all want me to write something new or is this okay? New. You all want me to write new? Okay, fine. I'll write new. See, let's do this. The only reason I was avoiding writing a new one is that it'll take some time for the template to load. Like VS Code has this issue. Like it'll take about 5 minutes for the entire console to load and etc. Yes. Let's wait for a second and see VS Code loads and then we can kind of write this out. Or we can use a Visual Studio server also to write it out. Okay. Resources. App hyphen service or web app, right? So you have an app service plan and I need a web app. Two things. Firstly, I'll do an app service plan and I will say that the name of the app service plan is parameters app service plan name. the name of the app service plan should be dev plan for a development environment, QA plan for a QA environment, prod plan for a production environment. I need the SKU of the app service plan to be F1 for development, F1 let's say for QA, B1 for production. So I'll also have to parameterize this. Say parameters, I'll say SKU name. Okay. Tags not mandatory, so I'll just remove this out. Properties, it's just looking for the app service plan name, so I'll say parameters app service plan name. And since I've declared so many parameters, right, I will have to make sure that these parameters are declared here. I'll say this is a string, and I'll just give a description telling that this is the name of the app service plan, ASP. This is what I'm giving right now. And finally, SKU name is also there, right? I'll say SKU name. See this, okay. SKU name is again a new parameter. And I'll say this is the name of the SKU. I need my SKU or I need my plan to be either F1, S1 or F1 or B1. Only these are allowed. So how should I declare that? I need them only to be in F1 or B1. Apart from
Allowed
F1 or
value.
B1,
Allowed
allowed
values.
values. Guys, please revise this. Reason I'm making sure this is being revised is that you will use this at the end of the day. Please do revise this out. So I'll say allowed values array, and in the allowed values, what are the allowed values right now? F1 and B1. Also, I need the development or the developers need the app service to be created in East US2. QA wants it to be created in, let's say, North Europe, and production, the client wants me to create it in Central US. I also need to test this out. So I'll also do what? I'll parameterize my location. Parameter, I'll say location. And I'm declaring the location name out here. I'll say, okay, fine, this is what it is. And I'll say this is the location, the name of the location. Finally, this is the app service plan. I also need what? The app service. I'll say ARM information. I'll say app service. Let's see app service if it's there. Web app. An Azure web app that I'm creating right now. And right now I would say, okay, fine, this is how it is. And I'll say the name of the web app is parameters web app name. Then it says, okay, fine, the Microsoft.websites and etc. And location is also what? Parameters. Parameters location. Then I don't need the display name out here. I can take this out. I also don't need the tags also. There is no tag value that I need. I'll just take the entire tag value out. It says depends on what? Society of the app service plan. But is this right?
No.
I have parameterized this, right? So I'll take this out and I'll say parameters app service plan name. Same thing again. Name of the web app is again parameters web app name, and resource ID again should change. I'll say parameters something like this. So I'll remove this out and I'll say parameters app service plan name. And I'll finally declare this value. Web app name. It should be the name of the web app for an environment. I need the web app to be something like, now this is what I need the parameters to be. For development, I need the app service plan to be something like or I need the resource group to be something like dev.rg and to be something like dev plan, and the web app to be created in something like EastUS2, and the name of the web app should be something like dev web app, the location code which is US East 2, the project name which is Ola in our case. In the same way, and I want this to be created in what? F1 plan. I also need something like the QA, like I have a QA team, right? So QA should have the resource group something like QA-RG. Plan should be QA plan. Location should be North Europe. And the name of the application should be QA web app North Europe NEU, simple code out here, and say Ola. And this should be in B1. And we'll talk about production. So if you need production also, I'll say prod. It's prod RG, prod plan, central US, something like prod web app, CUS central US Ola in B1. This should be the configuration of my infrastructure per an environment. But one thing remember guys is that I haven't passed any names. If I give a name, what will happen? If I let's say I give a name known as dev web application out here only in this template only, what is going to happen if I deploy this template? Only one will
That
be
is
deployed every time I create. Yep. Every time I create this, only one will be deployed. So I'm not giving, let's say, something like what? The parameters out here. So how do I pass the parameters to this? Or how do I deploy this to begin with?
default values.
Default values, but I don't want to pass a default value. That's what is my concern.
Parameter
If I
files.
pass,
Create parameter files.
okay, parameter files. Okay, great. I will create a parameter file. Okay, fine. If I let's say don't have a parameter file, okay, if I don't have a parameter file, how do I pass the value?
Arrays.
Sorry. But let's say if I want to deploy this file, how do I deploy it? Using what I'll deploy it?
PowerShell.
PowerShell. Can I pass these parameters in PowerShell?
Yes, you can.
You can override these parameters in PowerShell. So either you can have a parameter file or you can override these parameters in PowerShell. But now I have a condition that I don't want to do deployments from my local machine. This is not allowed because I am now coming with a DevOps technology and I now want to use Azure DevOps to do these deployments. Because I am deploying the code onto a web app using Azure DevOps. So why don't I use the same DevOps to go ahead and deploy this one onto the environment? Can I do that? Let's save this file firstly, and I will say this is web app arm.json file, and I will save it inside the repository. This is a repository. I have the code here. I'll say new folder. I'll say ARM templates. I'm creating a new folder known as ARM templates. I'm saving this file inside that particular folder right now. Okay. So what I'm doing, I'm saving my file into the repository. Let's go back. Let's look at my repository right now. It's saying, okay, fine. There are one change. What I'll do right now, I'll create a new branch because this branch is deleted already. I'll say new, create a new branch from what? I'll say this is feature, then ARM, something like this, the develop branch. And I'll check out with this branch right now. And I'll say commit this changes. I'll say pushing ARM template. Commit this changes. Publish the branch. And now I want to do a CI/CD pipeline right now. But one thing is that when I do a continuous integration, I'm getting some artifact, right? I also want my ARM template to be a part of the artifact so that I can use it in the release pipeline. Getting my need right now, if I am publishing the artifact, I am only getting what? A .zip file. I also need my ARM template to be reflected as a part of the artifact. This is the requirement right now. So let's go back into, let's say, Azure DevOps. Not this one, sorry, wrong window. Let's come back to the Azure DevOps. Let's remove this out. Let's remove the portal out, or let's place the portal for a second. And if you look at this, right, I don't have anything in the portal, nothing. Like just a default resource group. I can also go ahead and delete this out. There's nothing inside this. I'll also go and delete this out. So there's nothing in my portal. I'm starting absolutely from the scratch. Now I'll go into, let's say, my repository. And I have what? A feature something like this, which has ARM templates inside it. One simple ARM template. Now what I'll do before, let's say, going forward, what I'll do is that I'll firstly disable the continuous integration and continuous deployment so that we'll know what we are doing out here. So let's go here and let's say edit the pipeline, and I'll just disable the continuous deployment right now. And also, since the pipeline is taking a lot of time because you have Sonar and everything, right? I'll disable this out for now. In the real time, you'll have all these things out. Since we are doing a demo, we want our pipeline to be completed quick. So I'm disabling the Sonar. Also, I will disable the trigger. Save. In the same way, I will go to the release. I will disable the trigger. How will I disable the trigger? Very simple. Save. Now coming back to my repository, this branch is protected, right? I'll just do one more quick thing out here, is that I'll just disable the Sonar validation, because it will again take 3 minutes of time before we merge it into it. After I have done with this, what I'll do right now, go into my branches, go into this particular branch, create a PR with this branch. I'll say into what? Develop, and I'll say create. And the only check that it needs, so it's failing here because I haven't attached a work item. So when I created a pull request, I didn't attach a work item, I forgot about it. So here I can go in the PR, link a work item. This will complete. The only check that I need right now is that the contributor come and go ahead and give an approval. So I'll just set to auto complete, delete the feature branch, go into, let's say, the branch out here, pull requests. Sorry, this is a wrong project. 8 AM project. Going into, let's say, the pull request out here. I'll say approve. Done. Branches merged. Now question here is that will a CI pipeline now trigger? Yes, no, maybe.
No, no.
You have disabled the trigger, right? It won't trigger. But this time the condition is that I need my code to be built. A. I also need my pipeline to consider my ARM template. It's a .json file. Unlike a code, you won't build a .json file. The .json file is already in a language. It's in a language known as JSON. It's already in a language what Azure can understand. So I'm not building my JSON file here. I'll go into the pipeline. I'll make a very simple edit. I'll say edit this pipeline. I'll say add a step. I'll say copy files. This is the step that I want to add. And it says what is the source that you want me to copy from, to where you want to copy this from. I'll say okay, fine. The source is, let's say, the repository. This particular folder is the source. I'll say okay. It says ARM templates and it's asking me what are the contents. I'll say whatever is with .json, a wildcard.json. Please copy it where? Where should I copy it right now? Anyone? Where should I ideally copy this to? Drop folder. What is the drop called? Build.artifacts staging directory. I'll come here. I'll just take this, copy this variable, paste it here. That's it. Now I'll say save and queue. Now it says building the code and it will acquire the agent. It will do everything the same thing. This time it's also going ahead and copying my ARM template to make sure the ARM template gets reflected in the drop folder. Getting this, guys? So I'm doing a copy file, copying it into the drop folder. Let's give it a second. Now this will take, I mean, comparatively a very quicker time because I have disabled the Sonar and everything. I do not have the Sonar right now. So it'll build the code and say NuGet restore, build the solution. Then it's doing what? Copy files to what? D A A, meaning that is the drop folder where I want to copy the file to. So let's go ahead, build the solution, copy the file and see how the artifact is produced. And what should my release pipeline do now? Should it just release the code? It should create. It should create an infrastructure and then release the code on top of the infrastructure, right? That's the reason I'm copying all my files here. So it says uploading 6 files. Great. This is done. It says post build done. So let's see what it looks like. Going into the artifact, one published, drop. You have also what? .json file. Go into the release pipeline right now. As someone suggested, it should not only deploy the code, it should also create the infrastructure. This is where I'll say, don't just deploy the code out here, because if I click here, that web app is no longer there. It's deleted. There's no web app like that. It's deleted. Like it doesn't hold anything. I'll say add, and now I'll say ARM template. It says ARM template deployment. Add this, and this should be the first thing. ARM template deployment. It's now asking a couple of details. Let's fill it up. It says, okay, fine. What is, let's say, the Azure Resource Manager connection? Whatever connection that I created, I'll take this. Whatever subscription that I have, I'll just select here. This is the subscription that I have. It's asking me what is the resource group. What is the resource group, guys? What should be the name of the resource group for development environment? DevRG. But is DevRG created? So I'll just say DevRG. Just giving a name. That's it. It's not created. ARM template will create it. What should be the location here? East US2. Now what I am going to do out here is that I am not going to hard code the location. I am going to parameterize the location. Meaning what I'll do here is that I'll say dollar open close. This is the declaration of a parameter in Azure DevOps. I'll say location. Okay. I am making sure that this is a parameter. Second thing, it's asking you where is the template. I'm clicking on this particular folder and I'm saying this webapp.json, right? This is the template. Take this, add it. You have added this. It's asking you, does your template have a parameter file? I have not created a parameter file. So fine. But did I pass values to my template? No, I haven't passed it. So if I click on this, right, this link which says override template parameters, it says there are so many parameters here. Can you pass it? Okay. There's so many parameters here. Can you please pass it? I will say I will not pass a direct parameter. Rather, I will pass something like ASP plan name is something like dollar open and close parenthesis. SKU name is something like SKU name. Location is also a parameter, right? So I'll say it is dollar location, open, close, location. Web app name is also a parameter. I'll again pass a parameter here called web app name. I'll say OK. Why should I even hard code my resource group? Dollar open close RG name. Done. Now where should the application deploy, or where should the deployment go to?
Azure Cloud.
Azure Cloud. But yes, cloud, but where in cloud? Which service in cloud? Web app. But what is the name of the web app now? Yes. What is the name of the web app now? How do I pass the web app name here? Because I haven't created something, right? Where is the web app getting created? Where is the web app getting created? Which step the web app is getting created? Anyone? ARM template. The first step is creating your web app. And what did we pass the name of the web app here, guys? What is the name here? Dollar web app name. We haven't given a value yet. I'll take the same thing and I'll say whatever is the name of the web app that the ARM template is creating, go ahead and deploy to it. Okay. I'm saying dollar web app name, and I have passed a lot of parameters like RG name, like location, like app service plan name, like SKU name, like web app name. Did I declare the value to it anywhere? No. That is where I will use something known as variables. These are called pipeline variables, and I'll now add the variables here. I'll now declare the variables here. How do I declare it? Firstly, let's see what are all the variables that I'm passing here. So I'll just make a copy of everything. So I'm passing something called RG name. RG name, location, then app service plan name, SKU name. Location is again there, simple. So web app name. Let me go back to the variable section and I'll say add, and I'll start adding from the first. I'll say RG name. Here I'll say RG name. Name of the RG should be what? Dev RG for the development environment. So I'll say it is dev-RG. Location, East US 2. So East US 2. But for this development environment, I have only one location, which is East US 2. I'm only focusing upon development as of now. Okay. I'll say add. Next app service plan name is what? Dev plan. Like this is what we had, right? This is the configuration value that we had. And SKU name is what? F1. So let's see what is the parameter. How is it going for SKU? It's saying SKU name. I'll say F1. Finally, what is it? Web app name. And I have a name here. Dev something like this. So I'll just take everything out, copy and paste it into my variables. This is how I declare the variable. I'm not hard coding anything. I'm just declaring the variable out here. And what I'll do right now is I'll say save. I'll say ARM template deployment. And I'll now say create a release into the development environment. And creating a release here, this release is going to do two things. The very first, it will go ahead and deploy the ARM template. because that's the task I'm using out here. I'm saying ARM template deployment. So that's the first task. Second thing is what? It will release the code onto the infrastructure that we are creating out here. This procedure is called infrastructure as code. When you're using Azure DevOps in order to release it, now it says, see, the ARM template step started, and yes, it has failed. Let's see why what's the failure out here. Error code, it says, okay, fine, done the validation. It says one of the parameters has an empty key. So one parameter is not getting picked up properly. Let's see what is the parameter that I have. I have declared everything out here. Let's see. So you have SKU name, app service plan name, location, and web app name, which is good enough. Let's see which parameter is not getting passed properly. So you have app service plan name, RG name, SKU name, and everything. App service plan name properly declared, SKU name, location, and web app name. Everything is going in a proper way. Let's do one thing. Edit the pipeline. Let's do one more thing. Let's see how is it going in. So app service plan name and app service plan name just going in, and this is, let's say, okay, let's see one thing. I'm just taking the value here to see whether how it is, kind of getting reflected. I'll say okay. I'll say variables. I'll do one more thing. I have one quick doubt here. I'll just put a code here. This is dev RG and everything is good enough. Let's try to create another release and see if it fixes the issue. Now, when you're releasing, when you're basically creating something from the scratch, you will definitely face these issues, guys. You will need to know how to deal with those errors. This is an important thing. You need to understand how you can deal with these errors. You need to understand where, or basically where we are getting an error, and etc. And now it's saying, okay, fine. I'm starting the template deployment. So what happened was that the location, right? I passed it not in quotes, East US2. If I gave a space between, so it's also considering that space, and that's the reason it failed. So I'm passing the location in what? In quotes. Then this is successful. Now coming back to my resource groups, refresh this out. I have a dev RG created. And if I go into the deployments of this, I have a deployment that is done. It's just done. So if you go back here, the ARM template has finished this job. Now I am deploying the code on top of the ARM template, or on top of the infrastructure that I just created. Now the code deployment is going on. Okay. This is just one stage. This is a development environment. I need the same thing for QA and for production also. Now, when you create a pipeline like this, it's very easy to go ahead and create a stage for QA and prod. How do I do it? Now see, the code is getting released, right? So I'll say, okay, fine, the code is getting released. This is good. This is the stage. I need a QA, and I need the code to move from development to QA, QA to prod. I will say, do you see the option clone? I will say clone. It says copy of development. I'll say QA. I'll do another clone, production. Now, what are the values that should change from prod, or from development to QA, from QA to prod? What should be the values that should change, guys? Resource group name, whatever the values that you see here should change, RG name, location, and etc. So let's see how it looks like right now. The reason I have parameterized this is that I can reuse the same stage. I can clone and reuse the same stage again. Now, as and when I clone, right, if I go into the variables, you have, let's say, the same release and etc. What I will be doing right now is that I will add variables again. Now, this is scope to the entire release pipeline, meaning all the stages here will take the value that is coming here. But these values are what? For what? Only for development. I'll say this is only for development stage. This is called scoping of the values. Only for the development environment. In the same way, I'll go ahead and create multiple values for stage and prod. So I'm saying RG name and etc. Web name. Now the plan should what be? QA plan. Location is what? North Europe. So passing the location in quotes. Again it is what? QA hyphen RG. Application name is what?
Queue size saragana.
Yeah, sorry. Something like B1. And this should be for what? QA. And I'll have one for prod also. I can have one variable set for prod also. Same thing. I can just add all these variables firstly. Location, RG name, SKU name, web app name. And again say this is prod plan. Location is central US. RG name is like prod RG. SKU name is B1. Web app name is something like same but prod in starting. Finally, I'll scope my variables to what? The particular production stage. Save and then release. Now I want this code to go to development, then QA, then prod. I'll say create. Finally, release 5 has been created. And firstly, it will go to development. After development, it will move to QA. After QA, it will move to production. And whenever it goes ahead and creates the infrastructure and then deploys the code to that particular environment out there. So it's going to development, creating the development applications and etc. Going into prod and doing all that stuff. So this is the end-to-end pipeline, guys. Like how do you do it using ARM templates? Any questions till here, guys? Anything that I can take till here? So this is now going ahead and checking whether all the resources are there. Since ARM templates are incremental in nature, it won't go ahead and delete anything. It'll go ahead and see that, okay, fine, you are doing an incremental update. It'll just go ahead, check my infrastructure and then do a code deployment. Even code deployment will now basically, deploy the same code back again. After this is done, it will move to QA. Now this is done. It succeeded. It will now move to QA stage. It will now basically create whatever it needs to in QA. Then it will go into production stage. This is the procedure. Like we have to talk about approvals and etc. We'll talk about that. But any questions still here, guys? Any questions still here that I can take? Continuous integration. So continuous integration, continuous deployment. If you enable that, Again, from let's say whenever the developer checks in, does a commit, build pipeline will trigger, release pipeline will trigger, and take all this code and etc. Oh, sorry. No, production is the last stage. I didn't get you. What was your question? Continuous integration. You just go into and deploy into the continuous integration. Let's say Yaml template fail. Let's say. Okay. Because I messed up something. Okay, I'll check this out. But yes, like it would have been a very small miss, something like North Europe. This is good. Europe. I'm sorry. Web name is okay. I mean, this is okay. Like, I mean, even if I don't give a North Europe, it should have taken, but it's something that there's an issue with the web app out here. So, I mean, so there's an issue with the location out here. So, we'll correct that. That's not a problem. But yes, the thing is that after production, you'll have testing, meaning you're releasing the code to the client. That's it. Okay, you're just releasing the code to the client out there. Any questions, guys? Anything till here? Anything? Any questions? So we'll revise this once again. We'll see what we can enhance here, what are approvals and etc. We'll get in a lot of things out here, and we'll kind of try to build the pipeline more. Okay. Yes. Any questions, guys? Online, offline, anyone, anything?
Sir,
Yeah. Please go ahead.
sir, actually, it's a 2 hours class, sir, today. Uh,
Yeah. Yes.
Starting onwards, we followed, but today and tomorrow completely, I want to practice this. That's
Okay.
why I want to know just once you type in Notepad, sir, where first we have to start this second, and
Stages.
once please help me, sir, that we will
Okay.
start in like that, we will go move on
Okay.
today and
So
tomorrow.
you just okay. I will I will give the step by step stage and I'll put it in the same repository where you have the web app. Okay. You can take all
Okay.
those steps from there.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Guys, if there are no further questions, we're good to close. Thank you and have a great weekend ahead. Thank you, guys.